Hi, I'm Emily and welcome back to the Pepper Knits Knitting Podcast. I'm a knitter based in Perth in Western Australia and thanks for joining me for episode 25. It's been quite a while since I shared my last episode. I was in a bit of a weird place with my knitting and I just didn't know what I wanted to be working on. I definitely think now that the weather here has cooled down and we've been getting some cloudy and rainy days, although the sun is coming through this window, it's a bit of a weird overcast sunny day. We had some really nice crisp mornings this week and I feel like the cooler weather has definitely brought back a little bit of motivation for me to keep on knitting, which has been really nice. So I do have a lot of finished objects to share. Interestingly, I don't have that many whips, and one of them that I have on the needles, I'm pretty sure I'm going to frog. The other one I'm kind of contemplating ripping out, but we'll get to that in a minute. And I also have some really fun acquisitions and plans that I'll share at the end. But let's just start talking about my finished objects. The first one has already been shown as a finished object, but I did want to just give one final update to kind of close out this project. This is the Clara Cabled Rib Sweater. It is designed by cl.knits, and I just realized I'm holding it backwards, so there's a better view of it. Like I said, I've spoken about this quite a lot already, and I have been having some fit issues with the finished sweater, and I kind of anticipated that that was going to happen as I was knitting it, but I was knitting it whilst I was away, so I didn't really have the space and the capacity to be like doing mid-project blocks like I normally would and making fit adjustments. I just kind of wanted knitting that I could follow the pattern and hope that it would work out, and it definitely served that purpose. It was a really enjoyable project to knit and I'm like fairly happy with how it's come out at the end. It's not 100% perfect, but I am just trying to remind myself that it doesn't have to be, and it's okay if not every project comes out exactly how you wanted it to. I won't go into too many details about yarn and size and the whole process of knitting it. If you did want to know more about that, I would recommend looking at my previous couple of podcast episodes. But basically, where I left off last time was that I had finished it, I'd blocked it, and I think I had added a little bit of length onto the sleeves because they were coming up a little bit short. But the fit of the yoke was a little bit strange. It's a drop shoulder construction with this really nice cable that runs all the way down the shoulder seam. But I think that has kind of made the fit a little bit strange. As I had it on the hanger last time before I'd reblocked everything, it was wanting to pull back, and the sleeves still do, not so much as they were before, but they kind of want to roll back as well. And it was really annoying when I was wearing it. It felt like it was twisted around my body a little bit strangely and didn't look that great. But I did have a couple of helpful comments on my last episode. One person said that it's probably to do with this cable that's running down the shoulder because it is quite tight compared to the like the stockinette obviously has a different tension. And I definitely think that has something to contribute towards the fit. Although it is quite a popular design element that I see in a lot of sweater patterns, so I'm just surprised that that is contributing so much to the ill fit because it is such a popular thing to include in designs. There's not much I could have really done about that because I would have had to rip back basically the whole sweater and start again, which I just didn't really want to do. I'd already reclaimed this yarn from another sweater, so I didn't think it was really worth doing that again. Another person commented who was actually part of the test knit for this sweater and said that they chose a size with less ease than recommended in the pattern. For reference, this sweater has about 20 centimeters of ease and the pattern suggests 20 to 30 centimeters. So interesting that they found a better fit with less ease than that. And they also included some sleeve cap shaping. They did short rows to shape the sleeve before continuing the whole length of the sleeve, which I think is another thing that I'm seeing pop up a little bit more in drop shoulders to help with the fit, to do some short rows here just to kind of shape the sleeve a little bit further down on like this side of the sleeve just to make it fit a little bit better. So those are two interesting things I think are worth considering if you did want to knit one of these sweaters for yourself. If I was going to knit the sweater again, I would probably include those short rows into the sleeve And probably if I do knit another drop shoulder, I might just add that into the pattern if it's not there anyway, because I do think it would help with the fit of the sweater. The other thing that that person commented they did as well was there is a cable that runs from that shoulder seam all the way down the side along the back, and they somehow also incorporated that onto the front as well. So I assume where they split off here, maybe they just did it here, or perhaps they did it all the way around the sleeve. So maybe that has also contributed to a little bit of difference in the fit and helped overall. I did just want to share those helpful comments anyway, even though they're not things that I'm going to implement into my version. So I'll talk about what I have done differently. So I did mention that I'd already gone and added length into the sleeve in the last episode, and I did the same thing for the body because it was a little bit too short. It would have been okay to wear, but just functionally and keeping me warm, I think it was a little bit too cropped. I did the same thing as for the sleeves. Instead of redoing all of the cable rib, I put in a needle in the stockinette and like 2 rows below that, just above where the ribbing starts, and then cut that knitting, added how much length I wanted, and then grafted it back together, which was a little bit tedious, especially with the amount of stitches on the body, but it was still enjoyable, and the stockinette part went by really quickly. It's just the grafting back together that can be a little bit tedious, especially because I wanted to make sure my tension was quite even and matched the rest of the stockinette on the body, and I feel like I did a pretty decent job. If I look really closely, I can see a line, but from a distance and when I'm wearing it, it's really not that obvious, so I'm quite proud of myself for getting that to look as neat as it does. I think I added about 4 more cable repeats down the side here. I will say my grafting on the side and the cables is not the neatest, especially on one side. I think this side here looks a little bit janky. It was a bit tricky to get the pearls and the knits to line up when I was doing the grafting, but I kind of fudged my way through it, and it's on the side so it's not super obvious. So back to the fit of the yoke and everything, I reblocked this sweater and that seemed to have fixed it, I would say about 70% of the way. It's not perfect, but I'm just going to take it for what it is now. I think when I first blocked it, I didn't make sure the shoulder seam was far back enough, and that was creating that little bit of like weird twisting around. There is a little bit of shaping around the top of the armhole, which hopefully you can see here. So I used that as a guide instead. Essentially, I just made sure that the shoulder seam would sit where that shaping has happened. So instead of blocking it like this, I kind of pushed that back and aligned it like this instead. Hopefully that makes sense. The reason why I had it so far forward before is because I felt like that's naturally where it wanted to fall with the underarm on the sleeve. So I just kind of shuffled all of that fabric around when it was wet and kind of clumped it together a little bit on the front of the sleeve to make it lay flat. So I think that's something I'm going to have to bear in mind when I go to reblock this sweater, is just to make sure that I don't have that shoulder seam sitting too far forward. But yeah, we'll see how we go when winter comes around and I can have a chance to wear this a little bit more. And hopefully it's not something that bothers me and I do actually get to wear this sweater. I've spoken more than enough about this, and I feel like that is a good conclusion for now, and I don't want to be messing around with this too much more. It's at a point where I think it's fine to wear. I'm happy I added a bit more length to the body and the sleeves, and yeah, the fit is fine. It's okay. It's not one that I'm crazy about, but I'm just going to leave it for now, and let's move on to my next finished object. Next is my Tolsta tee, which is designed by Rebecca Clow, and I had not been working on this in the last episode. I have used this yarn for a tee a couple of years ago, and I recently decided I didn't like the tee anymore. I ripped it out, and last episode you saw I had knit it into a Tolsta tank, which I was not very happy with. I didn't like the fit. The yarn grew so much lengthways, there was too much ease. I just didn't really like the overall look of the tank, so I completely ripped that out and went back to the tee. And I have since knit the entire t-shirt, and I have to say I'm so much happier with this version. I did a few things differently with this version based on my first tee, and the things that I didn't really like about it, I considered those and changed them, I guess, just to make sure I would really like this one. So the yarn is Knitting for Olive Pure Silk in the colour Lamb's Ear. One thing I didn't like about either previous projects of this yarn is the colour, which I can't really do much about except for over dyeing it, which I don't really want to do. Over dyeing things is not the cheapest, at least here. The RIT dyes are kind of expensive, and I thought I would try and get away with just using the colour as it is. It is a bit of a weird greeny grey colour, so I wasn't sure how it would go with over dyeing. I couldn't decide on a colour that I was confident that would look good, so I thought let's just try and make it work as it is. Part of why I don't like it is because I think it leans more winter and it's a bit of a dull colour. It's not really the most bright summery colour, and obviously being in pure silk, it's more suited for summery garments. So I thought adding this texture in would make it a little bit more fun and vibrant as best as I could for this grey colour. And yeah, I think I've kind of achieved that. This is not an original idea. I think Rebecca herself did a few versions like this on the Tolsta tee and probably some of the testers, and I've seen a lot on Instagram. There was one in particular that I saw that prompted me to do this, and I kind of based mine on that as well. It's really simple to do. Essentially, I just did either 2 garter bumps or this like garter bump eyelet and then garter bump every 10 rounds. And because it's a raglan t-shirt, it was just very easy and straightforward. I also like that coincidentally, I've started and finished on the garter bump rows on the body and also on the sleeves, which I didn't really plan, but I do like that it looks intentional and that it balances everything out nicely. I cast this on in the first size. I only had 2 balls of the pure silk, and the first size in this estimates about 515 meters. So 2 balls gave me about 500 meters. So I thought I'd be cutting it close, but I wouldn't have enough to knit the second size. I also went down a needle size. I think this is recommended to be knit on a 3.5 millimeter needle, but based on how much it grew with the tank, I did go down to a 3 millimeter needle for the body. For the ribbing, I did go all the way down to a 2.75 just to keep it looking nice and neat. And as well, the neckline on my first version was a bit too wide, and I think that's just the general look and like design of the pattern. I also cast on 8 fewer stitches than the first size tells you to do in the pattern, just to keep it in nice and tight. And it also did grow out quite a lot with blocking, so I'm really glad that I ended up doing that, otherwise it would have been a huge, way too big neckline. So after I had cast on and knit the half twisted rib, I went into the short rows. I did add, I think, 3 extra sets of short rows than what's said in the pattern. Again, that's because my first version, the neckline was too wide and I felt like the back neck was sitting a little bit too low. So I added a few more sets, and I probably could have even gone for maybe 1 or 2 more. But yeah, it's much more comfortable to wear with those extra short rows. So because I cast on fewer stitches, I just knit the raglan until I had the same number of stitches as suggested for the pattern, or as the pattern tells you for the first size. So I guess that means I would have knit another 2 sets of raglan increases, and the yoke depth is actually really good, so I'm glad I did that. I think if I had not added those extra rounds in, maybe it would have been a little bit tight at the underarms. I probably realistically should have knit the second size of this pattern, but I just didn't really want to have to stress out about running out of yarn, which funnily enough is quite the opposite of what happened. Somehow, I really don't understand how this is happening. I must have had 2 skeins that were quite overweight. So this t-shirt weighs 110 grams, and I've triple checked that with my scales, and that's definitely correct. But I have like half a skein of yarn left, and I just don't understand how that is happening. So I must have just gotten lucky and had 2 skeins that were particularly heavy, or yeah, I'm really not sure, because they're definitely 50-gram balls and I only had 2 of them. But I have a lot left over, but then technically this has used 110 grams. So I'm interested to know if anyone else has had that experience. And in the past, that's probably not something I would have noticed or thought about. But I am trying to be a bit better about recording my yarn usage and just keeping track of things for my own sake and for other people who want to know when they're looking on Ravelry at projects. So yeah, that's interesting, and it means I probably could have knit the second size and had enough yarn and not had half a skein left over. but that's okay. I'm not going to go back and do anything about it now. This has 0-ish ease on me, maybe a tiny bit of positive ease. So I definitely could have done going up to the second size, like I said, but because I'd added those extra raglan increases, the yoke ended up fitting fine. Perhaps I could have picked up a few more stitches at the underarms for the sleeves. But saying that, I guess the kind of neutral ease in the sleeves matches what's in the body. I think if the sleeves were too oversized compared to the body, it might have looked a little bit out of proportion. I'll try this t-shirt on and show how it's fitting with basically neutral ease. You can really see that the neckline still sits quite wide, but definitely the back neck is not dropping as low back as it has on my previous Tolsta tee. It's not as high as I would ideally like it, but I feel like it's good enough and I don't feel like I'm constantly moving the t-shirt around, so it's definitely an improvement. This yarn does have such a beautiful drape, especially because I have knitted up and frogged it and like washed yarn, and it's been through quite a lot. It's definitely softened the yarn up really nicely. So I'm excited to see how it will change again once I start wearing this t-shirt and washing it even more. I think it's one of those yarns that will just soften up the more that you wear it. It has a really nice drape. I think again, if I had a bit more ease, you would notice that a little bit more, but it's really comfortable to wear. It wasn't too bad to work with. I know some people find the pure silk can be hard wearing with your hands when you're working with it, which I can definitely understand, but I managed to knit with this completely fine. I'm not really in a hurry to use this yarn again. It's nice. I liked working with it. Don't really love the colour still, but I think I can make it work with the textured pattern. I think brings a little bit more interest than having a very two-dimensional grey colour. If I was going to make a summer tee or something, I think I would pick the cotton merino over this yarn, but I think I see why people like it. I think the colour selection is a little bit more limited than the cotton merino, so I think that's another thing that would probably persuade me to lean more towards the cotton merino. We are still on theme with yarn that has been reclaimed from other projects. Both of those finished objects were made with yarn that I had reclaimed from other finished garments, and this one is no different. Again, one that I haven't shown on the podcast, but I was having a look through my stash and like my scraps and just the yarn that I have currently and figuring out what I wanted to do with them. I actually put everything into a spreadsheet, and I know you can do this in Ravelry, but it was just quicker and easier to do it in a spreadsheet, and just categorized everything by the weight of yarn and how much I had of it. I also, for some bits of yarn, put in potential project ideas that just came to mind as I was looking and sorting through all of my yarn, and it was really nice to just have everything in one place that I could see how much I had and figure out realistically what I could do with it. As I was going through that process, I realized that I had a huge amount of the Drops Brushed Alpaca in stash. I had originally purchased enough to knit a dress, and because it is a thicker yarn, also the color didn't really match the main strand that I had for that dress. I just didn't end up using it for that project. This is going back maybe 3, 4 or 5 years, quite a while that this has just been sitting there. And after I had realized I didn't want to use it in the dress, I very quickly knit the yarn into a cardigan. I held 3 strands of it together because I had so much of it and I wanted to just put it into a project anyway. I ended up not really loving that cardigan. It's alpaca, so it grew quite a lot and just lost its shape very quickly. So I very quickly frogged that cardigan, and that yarn has just been sitting in my stash ever since until very recently. It's kind of loosely based on the Lento sweater, which was super popular quite a few years ago. So because I had already knit this yarn with 3 strands held together, I was not about to undo all of that. It had basically felted itself together, so I was kind of stuck with knitting 3 strands together. I did a gauge swatch with a few different needle sizes and figured I liked the fabric I was getting on a 7mm needle, and I was getting 11 stitches per 10 centimeters. So because the pattern is designed at a 15 stitch gauge, I knew that I wouldn't really necessarily need to knit all of the raglan increases. I did cast on the first size at the neckline. The pattern tells you to cast on and immediately go into the ribbing for the neckline and then sew it together with the cast on edge, then start the raglan. Because this is an alpaca yarn and I knew it would lose its shape, I did cast on for the neckline and just start doing the raglan, and then went back and picked up stitches for the neckline just to give it a little bit more structure. I think I picked up 1 in every 2 stitches or something because I could see the neckline was way too wide. I should have just cast on fewer stitches because I knew my gauge was so much bigger, but I wanted something nice and oversized and loose and boxy, which I definitely achieved. I have actually gone back and added some elastic into this neckline because it was fairly wide, especially after I had blocked it. That has helped bring it into a point where it's wearable, but it is still a little bit of a wider neckline. For this sweater, I have ended up with 28 centimeters of positive ease. That's more than I would typically go for with a sweater, but I am exploring sweaters with more positive ease, and I thought this would be a good way to do it because it's a quicker knit, and I had the yarn ready to go that needed to get knit into a project. I'm really happy with the amount of ease that this has. It's such a comfy, loose fitting sweater because it's at a loose gauge. It's not something that I'm getting really hot in quickly. I have been wearing this quite a lot this week with the cooler mornings. It's just nice to throw on and not overheat so quickly, but it really fills a need in my wardrobe for very loose, airy sweaters such as this one, just to give me a little bit of warmth, but not something I immediately get way too hot in and need to take off. This is probably not the best t-shirt to be wearing under this with this kind of neckline, but we'll make it work and you can get the gist of how it looks. The color's a little bit different for me, but I think I like it. I think it suits me, and I don't have anything else that is this color, so it's nice to have something a little bit different. I don't think I mentioned for all of the ribbing, I did go down to a 6mm needle. It's not the neatest ribbing that I've ever done. I don't really knit at gauges as loose and as big as this with this kind of yarn. Blocking helped a little bit, but you also can't really notice it that much because it is such a fluffy yarn. It kind of hides any of the wonky stitches. I did do a Italian bind off for all of the edges. I'm not really sure how necessary that was because you can't really see the stitches. On the sleeves and particularly on the body, it does look like it's a little bit of a too tight bind off, which is my bad, but I haven't actually blocked this since doing all the bind off. I was expecting this yarn to grow quite a lot, so I knit everything and then put everything on hold, both the sleeves and the body, and then blocked it just to check that I was happy with the length of the sleeves and the body before I committed to doing the bind off. The yarn is quite sticky, so it would have been a pain to rip back any kind of bind off, whether it was an Italian bind off or just a regular in pattern bind off. So I do need to reblock this, like I said, especially the body. It sucks it in a little bit because it is slightly too tight. It's not that bad. I'm not in a hurry to have to reblock this. I think I'll just wait until I would naturally want to wash it anyway, and then just make sure that the bind off is stretched out a little bit more. It does feel really good to have this yarn into a garment and not sitting there collecting dust anymore. I pretty much used all the yarn that I had, which from memory was a fairly decent amount. I may have a little bit left over. I didn't want to run out of yarn as I was working on the body. I did knit both of the sleeves first, and I pretty much followed the pattern, I think. The sleeves are like fairly loose fitting. They have a gentle taper to them, but they are, you know, definitely not form-fitting sleeves. But again, I think that works really well with how boxy and oversized the body is. The pattern is fairly easy to follow. It was super popular a few years ago for, you know, a pretty good reason. It's quite a well-written pattern. I will say that the raglan increases throw me off a little bit because they're knit front and back instead of a typical make one right, make one left. That is such an easy thing to modify. I did go with the knit front and backs just for something a little bit different. I had worked on the Tolsta tee, which is the make one left, make one rights. So it was just nice to do something a little bit different. But yeah, it did take my brain a few rounds to figure out what I was doing. Maybe because I had just come from a different type of raglan. I just needed to think about it before I did it, but very easy to do. And because it is such a loose gauge, the whole project went by very quickly. It was nice to have a bit of a quick win and a sweater that I could have on and off the needles fairly quickly and just feel that sense of accomplishment, which was nice. And bonus that I managed to use stash yarn as well. We are getting through these projects and I feel like I'm doing a fairly efficient job. but we'll see. I have 2 pairs of socks to show next. This is the first pair of socks. They are a pair of very basic vanilla socks, although I think the yarn brings more than enough interest to them. The yarn is from Hedgehog Fibers. It's their sock base in the colour Dada, which I'd again had in stash for years at this point, and it was about time it made it into a pair of socks. Of course, I could have made it into something else, but just looking at the colours, I figured a pair of socks is where I would probably get the most wear with this yarn. I cast on 56 stitches on a 2.25mm needle, and I did some 2x2 ribbing, a fairly long leg, which I don't normally do, but I think it suits. It was nice to be able to like see more of the colours in the leg. And also I was working on these watching the Formula One at a friend's house, and I was nearing the point where I needed to start the heel, but because I knit these on like little 20cm needles, I didn't have my long needles to do the heel properly, and I still wanted to keep knitting, so I just kept going on the leg. When I did end up doing the heel, I think this is the Eye of Partridge heel, where you're alternating the slips and the knits on the heel flap. And I like to do a bit of a longer heel flap and then pick up more stitches so I can have a pretty long gusset, because I do have a high arch in my foot. I feel like that helps socks fit a little bit better. And then I finished off with a very standard wedge toe. So they're not the most exciting pair of socks to talk about. I'm quite impressed with how little colour pooling there is on the yarn. I think you can see a little bit. On the first sock, there is a little bit on the leg, but then on the foot, it pretty much disappears. And I think kind of similar for this one. I think there was a tiny bit of like pink pooling around here. But overall, I'm super impressed with how evenly this is dyed, and the overall look of the fabric is just very impressive. The colours are not something I would normally wear, and I remember picking this yarn thinking it was out of my comfort zone. It definitely is, but I think for a pair of socks, they are really fun. The sock base is 90% merino, 10% nylon, and it is very soft. So I'm interested to see how they will wear. I have a feeling they're going to pill quite a lot. I haven't used this sock base from Hedgehog Fibers before. I've only used their BFL base, which I really, really liked. I've only got 1 pair of socks in it, but they have held up really well. I'm super impressed with that base. I think that's just the nature of like a BFL base versus merino. So we'll see how it goes, but I just don't think they're going to wear as well. These are the next pair of socks that I have finished. This pattern is called the Saskie Socks by Saskie Co, who was previously known as the Petite Knitter. I have made so many pairs of these socks. I've knit pairs for myself, and I've knit 2 pairs for my cousin, and then this is like a 4th pair for myself. These are knit in Opal 4-ply, which is a really nice colourwork yarn, or like sock yarn that I think is perfect for colourwork socks. It has like that little bit of grippiness that you want when you're knitting colourwork, or at least I think really helps with the stitch definition, and I'm just really impressed with it overall. Here is a close-up on the colourwork motif. If you haven't seen my other pairs, they're really cute. I love rabbits. I have one of my own. Back when I used to share more like vlog type videos, she would occasionally appear in them, and she was definitely the star of the channel at that time. I haven't shared her in ages, but she's doing okay. She's getting pretty old, and she's definitely slowing down and is a bit grey, but as soon as I open the fridge, she's straight there ready for her treat, which is usually like a piece of kale or a carrot or something. But anyway, enough about Felicia, back onto the socks. So technically I haven't actually like recently finished this first sock. I knit this sometime last year. I think it was maybe like October, November last year, but I could be completely wrong on that. I knit this as one of the socks for my cousin, but it turned out way too small. My tension was just way too tight. I could only just get it onto my foot, and I was worried that someone with bigger feet than me wouldn't be able to wear it. I just set this sock aside and figured that if I had enough yarn left, I would knit a second one to have a pair for myself, which is obviously what I have done. I figured I had enough yarn to swap the contrast in the main colours, and I think it looks quite fun. It's something that the designer does quite often with their sock patterns. And so I feel like it is like true to the pattern and the design. I think I prefer the white as the contrast color, especially because the dirt is going to show so clearly on these, but you know, that's okay. They're just a pair of socks. This second sock has turned out a little bit looser than the first one, so I'm not really sure what I was doing here to get my attention so tight. I was trying to be mindful of knitting a little bit tighter on this second sock to match it, but yeah, it still ended up a little bit loose, and it's also a little bit big. The end of the sock blocker is here, and it is a little bit too long, and the same on the heel. It's a little bit too big, which is kind of annoying. I'm not sure how much it annoys me to like go back and rip out some of the foot. Anyway, I haven't actually worn these yet, so I'll give them a wear test and just see how it goes. It was nice to just have like another quick win and like an easy project to just pick up, and the yarn was there ready to go. I had the pattern. I had one sock already done, so all I had to do was knit another sock and feel like I've suddenly have another finished object. I have 2 more finished objects to share, so I hope you're hanging in there. They are both gift knits for my grandma, and her birthday is coming up next month, and we'll be going back to spend that with her. She's the person who actually taught me how to like knit properly. My mum had already taught me the basics of how to knit and maybe how to purl, but my grandma is the one who taught me how to do ribbing and different types of stitches and how you can combine knits and purls to create different textures. And I think she just kind of made me realize that you don't just have to keep knitting squares, you can actually do shaping and knitting and make interesting things. So I think she's the one who made me fall in love with knitting, if that makes sense. So I thought it would be nice to knit her a couple of things for her birthday. First up, I knit her another poet scarf. So I've already knit one of these for myself in the same yarn and everything. Just quickly, because I have obviously knit this already and fairly recently. This is the poet scarf by Sari Nordlund, and I've knit both of mine in the Juniper Moon Farm Herriot Fine in this really nice grey colour. It's such a soft yarn. It's mostly alpaca and it has a beautiful drape, especially once it's blocked, and I think it makes such a perfect little neck scarf. This is one of those scarves that you start off at a point and then increase into the middle and then decrease back on the other side. It has this beautiful textured pattern all over with moss stitch and lace. It's really fun to knit, especially once you're in the rhythm of the charts, because the whole thing is charted. As I said, I really enjoyed knitting the first one and I had enough yarn to knit another one. And it's something that I think my grandma will get a lot of wear out of, or at least she'll appreciate the work that's gone into it. I could have given her the first one that I had knit, but I just kind of wanted to keep it for myself. And I also had made a mistake in that one, not in the actual lace. I think I probably made mistakes in there, but managed to fix most of them. The edge of this pattern is, it looks like I-cord, but it's more like a double knitting all the way across the edge of the scarf. And on the decrease side, somehow I messed it up on my first one and I had one extra stitch. And I started off doing it correctly on the decrease side, so it looked like the same as on the increase side, and then somewhere along the way I managed to pick up an extra stitch, so it had a bit of a bump in there pretty much to the bottom and then back down when I realized. It was way too far for me to go back and fix it. I would have had to re-knit like half the scarf. It's not that noticeable, especially once you're wearing it. But I thought because I did enjoy knitting it, it would be nice to just knit another one and make sure I don't do the same mistake. I realized I could have chosen a different scarf pattern. There are so many out there. And I actually did start knitting an Italian summer scarf pattern, which is, I've seen quite a few people making on Instagram. It is designed to be knit with Sanna's Garn Lina or Tin Lina. So it's more like a summer scarf, and it is a beautiful garter stitch scarf with eyelet rows in it. I did start knitting that and I was holding that yarn double and I got a fairly decent amount of the way through it, but yeah, I just didn't love it as much as the poet scarf. The process was really enjoyable and it is actually a free pattern as well, which I didn't realize. So perhaps I'll go back and revisit that pattern with a different yarn, but yeah, I just really liked the pattern and the yarn combo of the first one. I really enjoyed the process, so I thought why not just knit another one the same. To go along with that one, I've also knit something else for specifically I guess my grandma for her birthday, but for both of my grandparents. It is a tea cozy, but it is the most ridiculous tea cozy I've ever seen. I hope you can tell that this is supposed to be Gromit from Wallace and Gromit. They don't particularly like dogs, so I really hope they can understand why I've knit this for them and that they recognize who it's supposed to resemble. I think because the colors are pretty close to the actual character, I think they'll be able to know who it is. I did follow a pattern to make this because I don't think there's any way I would have been able to engineer all of like the shaping and everything. So I did purchase a pattern by Rian Anderson. I used some 100% wool yarn just from my local Spotlight, so it was pretty inexpensive. And it's probably not something I would knit a garment out of, but I think it is perfect for something like this. I could have used acrylic, but I just prefer the knitting experience with wool. And I think it will make it hopefully hold up a little bit better, especially if it's on a hot teapot. I think acrylic might eventually start to wear down. I'm worried it might even melt a little bit, so hopefully wool was the right choice. The last time I shared this, I think I had almost finished knitting all the pieces. And I did mention that I had changed everything to be knit in a round instead of flat. That meant I had way less seaming to do, which was really nice. And in my opinion, I think it just looks a lot neater. I'm not very good at seaming things together and making them look neat. I just feel like you can always see where the seam is and it's a little bit bulky in that area. And just knitting things in the round is my preference. I guess that's because I'm like a Gen Z millennial knitter. I will say that sewing everything together was my least favorite part about this. I did it over like 3 or 4 different days. I would just pick it up, do a little bit, like one day I would stuff the legs and sew on like the toes, and then another day I would sew the pieces of the head together, and then eventually one day I just sat down and was like, I just need to get this finished and put him all together. He also has a little tail on the back, which I think is just so cute. This is such a silly thing to knit, but I love him so much. I think he's so cute. The eyes are also so goofy. I think one of them is a little bit loose, so I might have to go back and sew that on a little bit better. Yeah, but I love this little guy. The one thing I'm a little bit concerned about is that it's so front heavy, and like there's so much on the front of this that I think it might drag down a little bit and lift up on the back of the teapot. I did test it on my own teapot, but it is quite a tall one. It's a bit of a weird shape, and that was happening, but I'm hoping on a regular shape teapot it will be okay. We've made it through all of my finished objects, and this is reminding me why I prefer to podcast a little bit more regularly than once every like 4 or 5 weeks, just so I don't have gazillion things to share and feel like I'm talking and talking and talking about my knitting. But we're onto my works in progress, and as I said, I don't have too many, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to frog one of them and maybe another one. My first work in progress, and the one I'm pretty sure is getting ripped out, is this sweater that I've started. It's a beautiful pattern. It's called the Springfling, also by Saskie Co. If you're a very old-time viewer of this channel, I have knit this pattern before and since frogged that whole garment. This is nothing to do with the pattern. Both times I've started this and wanted to frog it is my fault and my yarn choice. The first time it was just way too thick and I didn't have enough yarn to make it into a proper long sleeve sweater, so I just settled for a t-shirt. And it was fine. It looked really good, but it was just not very practical because I knit it in 100% merino. It's a DK weight pattern, and I was holding like a sport weight yarn double. And with the color work and the yoke, it was just way too thick and heavy, so I never ended up wearing it. And I think at this point, I'm just going to cut my losses where I'm at now. Again, this is yarn that I had in stash that I wanted to use, and I bought it when we were in Ireland last year. It is Studio Donegal Soft. It's a lovely yarn. It's 100% merino, and I love the color. It's a beautiful creamy color, and hopefully you could see the tweedy color, like specks. There's some blue and like beigey tweedy bits. I only have one skein and 100 gram skein, which is 190 meters. So it's technically, it falls into like a DK weight based on that, but it is quite a plump yarn and it does bloom really nicely once it's blocked. So I guess probably this could be knit more of a worsted weight gauge rather than this, which I'm going for like a DK weight gauge. I'm holding it with some Bendigo Woolen Mills Luxury 8-ply in the colour Slate. And these yarns definitely have two very different characteristics. The Studio Donegal is a lot more rustic. It's very soft. It's not itchy at all, but it's a lot more of a toothy yarn compared to the Bendigo, which is very soft, smooth merino. I just don't really think these yarns pair well together. The colourwork looks really nice, but yeah, I just don't think these yarns are really meant to be used together in this project. I'm also knitting it completely off gauge. I did start knitting it on the recommended 3.5mm needles, but it was way too tight and it was a really stiff fabric, especially up here at the top where I was using the Studio Donegal. So I've ended up going to, I think, a 4.5mm needle. So I'm working it off gauge and I just don't think I'm going to wear it. I don't really love it. I think this Studio Donegal yarn is a really special skein that I want to put to good use. So this is not the project. I love how I just drop stitches and pick them back up, even though I'm literally about to frog this after this video. I need to do a little bit more thinking about what to do with that single skein. I could potentially order more of it in a different colour and use it together in a colourwork project, or I use it by itself for some kind of accessory. So I might have a look on Ravelry to see what other knitters have made with a single skein of that yarn, or what other yarns they've used in combination with it. I'm not sure how easy it will be for me to access this yarn outside of Ireland, although I am going back to England, so maybe I could order some and get it delivered to my grandparents' house and save a whole bunch of money on shipping, even though obviously I'm paying for flights all the way there. Maybe I'll have a look at doing that and see if it's easy to get it posted to them, because I do really like the yarn, and I did buy it with the intention of using it with something else in colourwork. I don't get a huge amount of wear out of beanies and scarves and other accessories, so it would be nice to put it into a garment. But yeah, I need to do some thinking on that. If you have any ideas, I would love to hear them. Please let me know. Next work in progress has not had very much progress on it. I only cast these on yesterday. It's another pair of socks, and this time it's a pair of Shortie socks. I'm struggling to work out how to show this in a way that makes sense. I have not done very much on these socks yet. The main strand is Filcolana Arvetta in the colour Caramel, I think. It's a leftover skein I had from the long-sleeved Lunan blouse that I had test knit for Rebecca Clow maybe this time last year. I'm actually thinking about frogging that because I don't really like how it fits, but I'm just trying to keep that out of my brain for now and focus on what I have going at the moment. So yeah, that is the main yarn, and I did do a contrast cast on with this nice beige colour. This is leftover from a pair of socks I had knit for my brother-in-law ages ago, so I don't have a huge amount left to knit a pair of socks, and I had been putting some scraps into my Sweet Shop blanket, and I had a little bit left over, and I think it's like the perfect way to be able to use up these tiny little bits of yarn doing a contrast cast on. I have knit one pair of Shortie socks before, and I love wearing them. I surprise myself at how often I reach for them, even over like my commercial made socks. So I thought it would be about time to knit some more. So the first pair of socks have a heel flap and gusset, which is my standard go-to heel that I like the fit of. I thought I would give a short row heel a go and just see if I like it for Shortie socks, mainly because I think it uses less yarn than a heel flap and gusset, and Shortie socks to me I think are a good way to use up like odd amounts of sock yarn that you have left, but there's not quite enough to knit another pair of full-length socks, but like a little bit too much to really use in like a true scrappy project. So it's more of like an experiment just to see how much yarn it will use compared to the heel flap and gusset socks. I just don't really enjoy the process or how a short row heel looks. It's not terrible, but in my opinion, I can make a heel flap and gusset look a lot nicer. Yeah, so it's a bit of an experiment really, just to see how much yarn I need for a pair of shorties with a short row heel instead of the heel flap and gusset. Maybe I'll knit a little bit more on the foot and then do a proper try on just to figure out whether I think it's worth going down this route of doing this type of heel, because I know it doesn't fit me as well as like a heel flap and gusset would. But yeah, I'm just going to see how it goes. Maybe I'll frog this. I think I'll just keep knitting a bit more of the foot, as I said, check the fit and decide from there whether I want to pursue this little experiment or not. So this is the amount of contrast yarn I have left. Obviously for the contrast bit of cast on, you don't need a huge amount of yarn. And I think it might be nice to do some stripes with this just before the toe is what I'm thinking. So if I do end up knitting the rest of these socks, that is the plan for this little nugget of yarn. And in between all of that, I have been plodding along slowly but surely on my Sweet Shop blanket. I've probably only added 2 or 3 squares, but it's just really nice to have that like project to anchor me back to something that I enjoy working on, and I'm just knitting away slowly but surely. This next project is a good transition between my whips and acquisitions. I had a yarn delivery yesterday, which was very nice. I placed an order with Knitting for Olive for some cotton merino. I had a couple of tanks and t-shirts that I wanted to cast on. I ummed and ahed about colours for far too long, but in the end I just forced myself to pick one and then go with it and make it work. And I'm pretty happy with my colour selection. So first off, I have 3 skeins of the cotton merino in the colour cream, and it definitely looks a little bit cooler toned than I was expecting it to be, considering it's called cream. Usually cream colours to me are a little bit more on the yellow side, so I was a bit nervous that this would be too yellow, but I think I can make it work. I knit up a swatch yesterday, and this is going to become a Palm Springs tank. This is a fairly new pattern released by Leslie from Knit California, and I've been very excited to knit this since she started designing it. I think it looks like such a wearable piece, and I think she knit one of her samples in this yarn in a different colour. So I know that this yarn, like how it will look in the finished piece. As I mentioned when I was talking about my Tolsta tank, the cotton merino is like my go-to summer yarn. I much prefer it over the other summer yarns that I've worked with. Not that I've used a whole, huge variety, but I love how this is nice and soft and breathable, but has the tiny bit of elasticity that you need from the merino. This yarn is 70% cotton and 30% merino, and for me that's like the perfect balance between not too much merino that it's too hot to wear in summer, but not too much cotton that it's dry and loses its shape very quickly. The Palm Springs tank comes in 11 sizes, which is so good to see. I love that there is just such a big range of sizes, and it's graded to fit a bust circumference of 71 centimeters up to 178 centimeters. Leslie has released a few patterns over the past couple of years, and they all are great designs, but this one really spoke to me, and I have actually cast on this afternoon. I have literally only knit this many rows, but I was just very excited to get going on a new project. And because the yarn arrived yesterday, I had knit the swatch. I was just itching to get going. My first impressions of the pattern is that I think I'm going to really like knitting from it. It straight away, the first thing that I saw and I was like, oh, this is such a nice thing to include, is that when you're knitting the back panel, which is what I've started, it tells you to knit to a certain number of centimeters/inches. And then at the bottom, it has a note to say, if you're on gauge, this is how many rows that is. And I was like, oh, I love that that's included. Normally, I would just calculate that myself if I know I'm on gauge or, based on my own gauge. But it's just such a nice detail that I really appreciate being included in there. I also ordered 3 balls of the cotton merino in this color called Mole, which is my all-time favorite color from Knitting for Olive. It was, I think, the first time I had ordered from Knitting for Olive. I had 2 skeins of this exact yarn in the same color, and that was going back a few years, and I think they stopped selling this color. They discontinued it for a little while. So when I saw on the website they had brought it back in this batch of cotton merino, I was very excited, and I was like, I have to get some and knit it into something for summer. This yarn is what made me realize how much I love this color of brown. As you can see, I'm wearing more brown today, and I have knit plenty of other brown things since then, but it's just a color that I think really suits me and my style. And so yeah, when I saw that it was back, I ordered 3 more balls of it. My plan is to knit a sea salt tee which is a design by Atelier Castan. I have knit a few of these tees before. I actually have the first one here that I knit. It's a beautiful pattern. It's a contiguous sleeve construction with really nice folded over edges. However, this yarn has not held up very well. I'm really disappointed in this yarn. It's the BC Garn BioBalance. It's the first and only time I have used this yarn, and my first impressions was that it's a little bit itchy, and I didn't really love wearing it, but because I love the design so much, I would just push through and wear it anyway, even though it was quite itchy. However, that's not the main thing that bothers me about this yarn. The colour has faded immensely to the point where I just don't like the colour of it anymore. It's really patchy and has such a strange green undertone to it. It's on the front and the back is not quite as bad, but yeah, it's really disappointing, and I think that's just come from wash and wear. I've never put this in the washing machine. Maybe it's just from being in the sun. I am conscious as not to leave my knits in direct sunlight when they're drying, but I've never experienced this with a yarn before. If I take it off the hanger and compare the inside and the outside, I hope you'll be able to see my disappointment. This is the original yarn colour, and then below is what it has faded to. So it's just basically a different colour at this point and has such an unusual green colour to it. I thought maybe it was me when I had washed it once in water that I had washed something else in and made it go green. But I have my swatch somewhere up here. I can see the same thing has happened to my swatch. So it's obviously just a reaction with the sunlight that has made it go this colour. That's enough talking about that yarn. It's, yeah, a big disappointment, and I would definitely not use that yarn again. It's been on my mind for a while, and I'm glad that I finally have the yarn now to replace that t-shirt. The original sample is knit in Sandnes Garn Lina, or the tin Lina held double, so kind of closer to a sport DK weight. And this is more like a light fingering weight, but I think it's a 24-25 stitch gauge, which is the same as the Palm Springs tank and also the same as the other tank top that I knit recently. It's from Tory Knits, I'm forgetting the name now, but I also use cotton merino for that, so I know I can get the same gauge as the pattern with this yarn. And obviously I'll just have a bit of a looser fabric, but that's completely fine. I know I like how the fabric looks and feels at that gauge, so I'm pretty confident I'll be able to make it work. The sea salt tee comes in 9 sizes and is graded to fit a bust circumference from 81 to 162.5 centimeters, so another great inclusive pattern. Those are my upcoming plans that I want to cast on very soon. I have some more yarn on its way to me as well, but I think I'll save those plans for when I actually get the yarn, just in case I change my mind based on how the colour actually looks. Thank you so much for watching until the end. I truly appreciate you spending your time with me, and I hope you got some good progress done on whatever you're working on. As always, I would love to know what it is that you've been knitting or crafting away at, or what your upcoming plans are, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye!